everybody, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name is Paul.
This is Ryan.
And today we are talking about In the Abyss.
Yeah, In the Abyss, written by Skip Williams. This is a second edition D&D Planescape adventure for mid-level adventurers. I believe this one actually is mid-level adventurers, like level 10-ish.
8 to 10, yeah.
This was originally published in 1994, which I just realized was a really long time ago, and I feel super old.
Canucks run.
Yeah, and it's available as a PDF on the DM's Guild, as a lot of these older adventures are. Brief synopsis of the main plot. Pretty straightforward. The PCs are hired to retrieve or destroy a flying airship of doom and destruction, which is currently, unfortunately for our players, found in the first layer of the Abyss.
Woo!
So they have to go in the Abyss to do the adventure.
Not to be confused with Out of the Abyss.
Yes, which is a completely different abyss.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
This is the literal abyss.
Yeah.
I admit I have a soft spot for Planescape adventures. It's easily one of my favorite settings. I think Planescape's probably second to Eberron, but it's up there. And I kind of touched on this a bit last week when we talked about the last adventure there, but I think that high-level play should almost always end up in a Planescape setting. I think this is where all DM campaigns should come to die, is the planes.
Yeah, you've said that, I think, last week or the week before. But yeah, it's seems like the stakes are higher again. You know, you don't matter as much anymore if you come visit this place.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about the planes, is it makes sense to be interacting with interplanar beings and demons and devils and angels and et cetera, et cetera. It all fits appropriately in this setting. So I guess when I'm looking at an adventure that's 25 years old, not everyone may be familiar with Planescape these days, but it's basically a setting that's mostly set around the planar city of Sigil, which sort of the Coles Notes version of it. It's a neutral metropolis set in the center of the multiverse. So it's this giant melting pot of interplanar beings. All are welcome as long as they keep to the rules. And it really allows for all kinds of crazy interactions between disparate kinds of creatures, right? You're just as likely to be encountering a werewolf or a vampire or a Baelor walking down the streets, and as long as they're not causing murder or mayhem, they're totally fine to be doing business here. So it makes for sort of a wonderful base of operations for any plane hopping adventures.
Mm-hmm. General impressions?
I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I set my bias right out there from the beginning. So like, I like Planescape adventures, so I'm probably looking at this through somewhat of rose-colored glasses. So I'll wear my bias on my sleeve here. Yeah, I liked it overall. I mean, there's some aspects about it that I guess we can point out before we get into the nitty-gritty details of it. Planescape and Sigil in particular have a lot of factions that play a role in stuff, and this particular adventure involves the Doomguard faction. Mm-hmm. It's their ship that's missing.
Yep.
Not that you'd necessarily find that out right away, but despite the fact that factions can play such a large role in the setting, I don't think that you as a player or even as a DM need to really understand anything about them to enjoy this particular adventure.
I didn't get that impression through reading through it. They're mentioned, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So it's things that, like, if you are an aficionado or know a lot about the setting, you can definitely use those aspects to enrich the experience, but not having that information or providing that information to your players, I don't think it detracts from the enjoyment of the adventure whatsoever. Now, that being said, regardless of the amount of knowledge they have going into it or whether they're involved in the factions from the get-go, depending on how it plays out, the PCs will definitely have made some new friends and some new enemies.
Yep.
Of faction members for sure.
Yep.
Just as a consequence of succeeding or failing in their endeavors. Another thing I want to point out regarding Planescape, which I think can be a bit polarizing for the setting, is that the designers definitely felt the need to include some lingo that's setting specific, if you will. So when you're reading a Planescape adventure, you constantly encounter terms like bloods and burks and jink and things like that, which might serve as sort of a barrier for new people reading it or getting into it. You can usually figure out what they're talking about, but it kind of, I can see sort of both sides of it. For some people, it's going to be kind of annoying. Other people might think it's super awesome. I'm kind of indifferent. Like I get that it adds a certain appeal to it. And mostly what I like about it is it kind of serves as like secret code phrases.
Right.
Like you can figure out who knows anything about Planescape by like just bringing up certain terms. If they know what you mean when you're talking about Burks and Bloods, you're just like, you're in the club.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar, but reading through it, I kind of just figured it out as you went. Yeah, it's whatever. Doesn't matter. It's part of the environment in the world, so might as well use the terms.
Yeah, I see it as, I can understand it being a barrier to accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because the way the characters talk. So if you're doing exposition and just reading out of it, sometimes like I could see players being like, what are you talking about? Now, that being said, if your characters are new to the city, it totally makes sense that they wouldn't have any idea what the locals are talking about with all the slang and lingo, which I think is kind of an interesting angle that you could play up a little bit if you wanted to.
I think I liked like reading about it. I don't know how much wealth you should have when you're like level whatever 8 coming to the plains, but the sort of the hook and the reward for doing this was not insignificant, you know, like is he a pit fiend? Maybe he's like just like tens of thousands of gold for rewards for doing this, you know.
That's huge amounts of money.
And, you know, I think it would feel cool as the first time coming into the plains and, you know, and like the first little quest you're going, and this guy's like, yeah, 35,000 gold if you go and do this. And you just be like, whoa, okay, we're in another level of fantasy, right? Like that this level of wealth is thrown at us, and these are the rewards for these things that we can do.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely ramps it up. And especially I like some of the sort of the bait and switch aspect of some of the rewards, that it's kind of like, here, this is amazing, and then it goes away.
It disappears.
And normally I'd complain about that, but it's baked into the adventure for good reasons. And we'll obviously touch on it in a second. But really, I found myself really liking this adventure beyond just the Planescape aspect of it. I like that there's some intrigue and politics involved in it, but it doesn't actually detract whatsoever from the main thrust of the adventure here, right? So it's basically just the PCs as hired guns.
Yep.
Right? Like that's the main point here. But it's got all of this sort of background trappings that they can engage with, or you can use in the future for more plot threads and what have you.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful like introduction to this area, right? Mm-hmm. Like you get your first information from your quest giver, if you want to call them that, and then there's each of the factions have their different motivations around the ship of chaos. So you might find yourself being more inclined to help someone if your PC's vision aligns with what their like faction's goals, right? And it explicitly outlines what each faction, what their intended goal is with the ship of chaos. So I mean, the more we talk about it, and like the more that the scope of this adventure is, the more it would be like a really cool adventure to introduce your players into this world.
Yeah, it's for sure. And it's not, I mean, it's got some really cool encounters. It's not particularly linear. Like some of it is kind of hex crawly as well. So it's got a little bit of everything for everybody. And, regarding sort of the PC's job, if you will, here, I'm normally one to complain about PC motivation in adventures,
Yeah.
right? And that may make it seem like I come across as more of a narratively driven DM, and I don't know that I necessarily am. Like, I like the nuts and bolts rules a lot when it comes to games. But I think with me in particular, it's always that I want there to be actual motivation, like in character game motivation. Why would my players be doing this? You know, not why would my person, like why would my players be doing this, right? Like my players are doing this because we're playing D&D.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're doing. But I like it when the characters have a logical reason to do this. And this adventure does a nice job illustrating that reason doesn't have to be overly complex.
Yeah.
This is, you're hired to do a job. Why are your players doing this? Because they were given a ton of money and they can get a bunch more money for doing this job.
Yeah, that's enough.
That is a strong character-driven reason to be doing this. And I think that's completely fine. I think in most games and most adventures that totally makes sense. It's just I usually complain about it when there's no reason that you would ever be doing this for no reward, right? Like that's where I generally complain about this type of stuff. So this is just sort of a good illustration. Like, you don't need to have an amazing narrative reason to be involved in something. Like, money is totally fine.
Uh-huh.
And I'd rather money as a motivation than the goodness of your heart or general curiosity that gets used more frequently than you like in a lot of adventures.
Especially now. I mean, maybe in like some of the old, I guess maybe in this version, like this is written in 94, right? That like alignment sort of might have informed your decision making, but like specifically now in modern D&D and role-playing games, I don't think it does, So I agree with you. Give them something. Give them a reason.
There just needs to be some sort of reason for the characters buying in.
And I just like that. I really enjoyed the simplicity of this adventure too. The hook was pretty simple. It was like, this is what you're hired to do. Go and do it. It wasn't like an extravagant investigation, or it didn't take much time to get to the place that you needed to go. It was kind of always in front of your nose. You just had to find the means to get there. And there was some moderately interesting things in between you and the ship when you finally get there. It just felt simple. And then the ship was just like awesome thematically. It was cool.
Yeah. So I guess we can talk about the hooks. Or the hook. There's only one.
The trumpeter. It's a call to arms, effectively. It says we need,
it's basically a hear ye.
Yeah, come to the grinning imp, and so will give you your quest. And so you do, and you go to the grinning imp, and if you're foolish enough to use true seeing or whatever it is to see what people actually look like, you get some nice narrative, exposition about demons and pit fiends and blah blah blah, and the uglies and atrocities that are actually in this place.
So the hook is it's an illusion that's been paid for. So it's going on in multiple parts in the city, and I think it's once an hour for the whole day or something like that. Which is, it's literally a hear ye, all those interested in blah 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 blah. So the PCs should know that it's a job in the abyss before they even show up. And I did like that they can sort of get information from other nearby people who are just like, I'm not going to the abyss. That's a suicide mission type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But what's nice about this hook is this sort of ties into what you were saying before, is this being used as an introductory adventure to the setting, is the PCs don't inherently need any ties to any of the factions or anything really at all in this particular setting, right? Like, this is a hook that the PCs literally could be accidentally teleported to Sigil because, they activated a random portal somewhere. Mm-hmm. Be like, what is going on? And you can throw this hook to them at any point, right? So it's definitely a hook that can be used by people who just happen to be in the right place at the right time, which works just fine. So the adventure itself is broken into basically 3 parts. There's the getting the job, finding the ship, and then dealing with the ship when you're on the ship.
Yeah.
And I really, I guess, from the getting the job aspect of it, you mentioned the grinning imp. You mentioned that it's tavern that's frequented by shapeshifters.
Yep.
So everybody in there's like polymorphed or a lycanthrope of some sort, which I think is just kind of cool.
Yep.
And I really like the detail that because it's a tavern that's frequented by shapeshifters, they don't accept silver coins.
Yeah.
Like silver's just basically banned from the premises, which I thought was kind of cool. I enjoyed the fact that the PCs are being hired by devils under the guise of an insurance company, which is a real insurance company in the setting. Like you can find out that they're not actually working for this insurance company, but the insurance company does exist. And the idea that there's insurance companies for interplanar merchant shipments just was a great little detail.
And like the more I think about it, the more awesome I think this is as an introductory adventure into this setting, because Willem, the guy that will give you the quest, will try and bait you into taking his wish as well to like find the ship, and he'll actually like ask you, so you wish to find the ship, and if you answer yes, then he's granted you his wish for the year, and now you're kind of bound to do this. And I did look up wish in this era, and it ages you 5 years. So like if you do accept, you will age. And it's like, you're thrown into this world where you think it's like, money's being hucked at you, and like all of a sudden all these powers are flying around. Like it would feel interesting.
And the pit fiends can give a wish once per year. So that's how he's able to do that using a spell-like ability. And I also like the fact that, like you said, they're using True Seeing to see like what he really is. You're like, oh my goodness, you're a pit fiend. He's like, and
he's like, well, now that you know, are you going to do it or not?
Yeah, it's like, it's this whole response is like, and your point is like, if you got a problem with me, then you're probably in the wrong line of work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, like tying into like this is a great introductory adventure is like it really forces the players and then the characters to evaluate their preconceptions
of what's good and who are you working for.
Like because again it doesn't really matter. Like the Willem, the pit fiend, basically is like, yep, I'm a devil and I'm asking you to mess up the demons. So do you like demons? No, I don't like demons either.
So we're both good guys.
Right? So it's definitely that type of enemy of my enemy is my friend aspect of it. I do think it does a great job of illustrating sort of the gray morality that can exist in such a complex city like Sigil does.
Yeah, and like I think we're downplaying him being a pit fiend. Like he does offer you some pretty powerful and amazing things that can have negative effects on you if you decide to use them. The priest power keys.
Yeah, the pay for this job is just flat nutty.
Yeah.
Like you get a ton of cash up front. You can get 3 of any magic item that the PCs want. Only they can't be unique and they can't be artifacts.
Yeah.
But other than that, if they want a Vorpal sword, yep, I can get you a Vorpal sword. Then you get 30 levels of spell scrolls, and you get a power key or power keys for priests and a general spare spell key for mages.
But asterisks on the priest power keys.
Well, let's explain what a key is first.
Go ahead, because I don't really know.
Okay, so I don't know how it works in 5th edition. I didn't bother to check it up, but at least for the Planescape setting, certain magic spells don't work on other planes. So different planes have specific restrictions on the kinds of magic that can work there. So for example, summoning spells generally don't work on outer planes, right? So there's lots of magic that is tied to functioning properly only on the prime material plane. So what power keys or spell keys allow you to do is to use that type of magic on other planes. So you can use your summoning magic, you can use your banishment magic and things like that. So power keys are usually provided by a priest or cleric's actual patron. So like a Solar comes down and gives you this amulet and says, this will allow you to perform this mission in the abyss. You can use your magic. So they're usually like single mission based thingies. And arcane or what spell keys are the same deal, but they're for magic users.
But the interesting thing about the power keys that he'll provide to you is they're not powered by your deity. So if you decide to use them, say you've got 7th level spells, you lose the ability to cast those 7th level spells from your deity. They are now granted by the Nine Hells deity,
Or just
Bait
the
or
nine hells.
bad or
The
the
bait
nine
or
hells.
is just the
Yeah.
it's the nine hells.
So the nine, yeah, so exactly. So now you have, and the more you use them, the more you lose the power from your deity, and the more you gain the power from the nine hells.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was pretty cool to me, to do that unwillingly, to sort of lose faith with your deity and all of a sudden be like a cleric of the nine hells accidentally because you didn't know any better.
Well, they also like the corruption isn't completely.
You can atone for your sins, basically.
Well, yeah, but the corruption is fairly obvious because it starts to manifest physically.
Yeah.
So like you start to develop warts or scaly skin, and if you keep doing it, even after you notice this, you get more and more fiendish.
Like horns
You
and
can grow
tails.
horns, tails, wings, and at the highest level of corruption, you actually get some sort of physical bonus.
Yep.
So like your skin becomes scaly and it gives you an armor class bonus, or you get wings and you can do some low, short flights and things like that, which I think is kind of awesome. So I could definitely see situations where a player just embraces his inner, devil. Yep. And just says like, yep, this is what I am now.
I'm a demon cleric now. Let's go.
Yeah, because there's, other than the fact that like your alignment's going to change and you're going to become more quote unquote evil, if you're already like a neutral cleric, maybe you just lean into it.
Yeah.
Like, I could definitely see situations where they're like, I'm okay with this.
Yeah. Especially if you have no plans of going back to the material plane.
Yeah. So, and it only really depends if they use spells that would require a power key.
Yeah.
So as long as you avoid that type of magic, then it doesn't really matter so much. But I thought it was super, super cool.
Mm-hmm. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but the kicker on the items that he will give you is that they disappear after a certain duration of time, a month, or is it?
Yeah. They're basically
like
constructs from wish spells.
Yeah.
They're not real items, so they don't last indefinitely. But I was trying to envision like what type of magic items would players want, and what type of things that could they actually be asking for.
Uh-huh.
And having read this, I'm like, oh, you need magic carpet. If you had a magic carpet, this would make your life so much easier.
Uh-huh.
But I'm envisioning like my typical players, and it would almost all be weapons.
Mm.
Like they wouldn't ask for like useful things, or practical things. They would be asking about things that inherently increase their
power level.
So like meta magic items or weapons or what have you, not magic carpets or wondrous items of any sort.
True.
But yeah, no, like this adventure would be so much more straightforward if you had a magic carpet.
Yeah, because flying actually ends up being like a big part of the problem.
Yeah. So one would hope that the job being to get to an airship, your players would be asking about some sort of items that would help with the flying aspect of this. Now, there's no guarantee, but one would hope.
Yeah. That's a good point, because there's like a lot of parts in the adventure like, well, flight only lasts so long and you're this far in the sky. So I guess after speaking with Willem, he if you accept the job, he disappears for a bit. You meet him again and he gives you your items, and he shows you exactly where to go, and he sends you to a barber shop where the portal is to enter the abyss.
Yeah, so Sigil being at the sort of the nexus of the planes, it has portals to everywhere, every other plane of existence in it. And the way the portals work is you basically need the proper key item to activate the portal. So to get to the abyss, there's a portal that responds to iron. So you just need to go to this doorway with iron, and it opens. And that's what I always really enjoyed about Sigil as a location, is you could be walking down the wrong alleyway on the wrong day, carrying a flower pot of petunias, and then boom, you're in, the elemental plane of fire.
Whoops.
Like, and that's kind of the half the fun of the setting, is that a lot of the people in Sigil never planned on ending up in Sigil.
Right.
Like they accidentally ended up here, or spells went wrong, or they angered the wrong magic user and they got shunted off into the planes, and people kind of just make their way here. So that's kind of the fun thing about Sigil, is your players don't have to be high level to get here.
Right.
You
could be an accident.
You could have first level adventurers, at the end of your first adventure, end up getting plane shifted to Sigil. And then the rest of the campaign becomes planar based, which is kind of some of the fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the portal is in a barbershop, like you said. The key point regarding the barbershop is that apparently this is only a temporary portal. It only lasts 3 days, a month, or something like
3
that.
3 days, I think. Yeah.
So that puts a time pressure on the players. So they basically have if they want to use this portal to get back, there's a tight 3-day restriction on it. That being said, I believe, I might just be remembering this incorrectly, but I think Willem, their patron, tells them of another way to get back via a different portal that leads them to another city that is ruled by a poison aficionado. So if they plan on coming back via that portal, they should bring some poison with them to sort of give as a gift for using the portal, which I thought was kind of neat. But as long as the players don't dawdle, they should have no problem getting in and out in 3 days.
I don't think so, yeah, especially since the ship is within view once you portal in.
So whenever they're ready, they go to the Abyss, and the Abyss itself is basically a hex crawl.
Yep.
So there's lots of cool things. Like it's different hexes have different environmental effects and different, there's evil trees and all kinds of fun stuff. So there's a number of triggered encounters, and there's several optional encounters depending on which types of hexes the PCs end up going into.
Yeah.
There's one major triggered encounter that happens basically as soon as they show up. There's a demon, two-headed demon whose name escapes me.
Oh, the Malideus.
Whatever.
The dog snake.
The dog snake demon guy.
Yeah.
Basically, these are recruiter demons. So they go around finding other demons and whoever to recruit them to the blood war. So the PCs show up and he's like, hey, fresh meat for the grinder. And he's not there to kill them. He's recruiting them, and he will take them to the front lines to fight in the blood war. Unless he's bribed. So the PCs either need to fight him or bribe him. If they bribe him, he can actually, or it, I guess, can provide information about the ship they're looking for, the ship of chaos, because he's seen it. He knows where it is. So it gives a couple of different ways of dealing with the encounter. The PC's bribe needs to be like 10,000 gold.
Substantial, yeah.
Which they actually have, because they got paid, unless they spent it all.
Yeah, they got a retainer
their
from
advance,
their advance, yeah.
Should cover it. But it gives them some options into how to handle it. It's always nice to have options when you're running encounters.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of it is really just exploring bits of the area that you're in, because there's like 7 different areas that they outline that you could do stuff in.
You don't have to, like, you can go make a beeline, but some of it's super cool.
Yeah,
you can go to an abyssal city.
Yeah,
just because.
Yep, you can go to the ruins, citadels, conduits, cities, caravan routes. You can participate in all this stuff if you so choose.
I just like that, like, you can go to a city, an abyssal city, and it's totally fine as long as they, avoid the press gangs that are coming through to recruit them.
Yep.
And one thing I did like about this, if they go to a city, they have an encounter with a young woman that, is super distraught and begs them to take her with them to help her escape the abyss. So she's been trapped here. And of course, if the players take the bait, it's a succubus. So that's a future them problem.
Yeah.
And I just like that the way it's written is that, like, she will do everything she can to help them while they're in the abyss. So this literally doesn't play any role whatsoever in the current adventure, but just sets up future excitement. And I really enjoyed that. And another encounter that the PCs can have that's along the same vein is that the magma lakes, or whatever they call
Afridi?
it. Not the Afridi. I didn't actually write anything about that, so you can talk about him. It's the the Glabrezu, Gudnij, right?
Yeah.
So he's a sort of foreman at the ironworks, if you will. And when the PCs encounter him, he's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
He gives them some gems. He can provide some more information about the ship and what direction it was flying in. And he also, or it also gives them a coin with his name on it. And the PCs are instructed to, use it to summon the demon at any time, and they'll help. You'll help them. And I really like that because the demon's honest, right? Like, it's not a ghoul Nij or whatever. It's not its real name. But if summoned, it'll show up anywhere and quote unquote follow their instructions, but will only follow their instructions in the most destructive way possible. So it'll, it's like, oh, I need you to, find this, whatever, find the location of this person. So yeah, you'll do that, but it'll do it by like murdering people while interrogating them until it finds the information that it wants, all the while framing the PCs as having done it. So every time they use their demon friend, it's going to leave chaos and destruction in its path, which is kind of the whole point of being a demon.
Yeah.
So I just really like that. Again, it may not even play a role in the current adventure, but coming out of this...
And it's funny, too, because, like, all this could be happening without your PC's knowledge. You're like, we need to find this, and, like, you're just... an amount of time lapses, and he shows up, and he's like, hey, and you're just like, yeah, this guy's great. Yeah. Like, he's so helpful.
Oh, yeah, it should be a slow burn,
yeah,
that it all comes, back to them eventually. It shouldn't be obvious. Like, I definitely think you need to encourage the usage of it, especially, like, early on, because if they summon them to help them while they're on the ship, he's going to help them kill demons. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's sure, great. Like, there's nothing that it can mess up then. So you want to have something visibly successful early on to encourage repeat customers, if you will.
Yeah.
But between the Glabrezu and the Succubus, coming out of this adventure, the PCs could have two demons basically following in their shadow that aren't really good, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Like the Glabrezu will be actively trying to frame them for the worst type of horrors ever. And the Succubus is just going to be trying to manipulate them into killing each other so she can get them alone to drain their life essence. And I just think there's some really fun non-combat encounters.
Yeah,
it's just like happen after everything else.
It's all subtle, It's like everything seems good here. This seems like a good place to be, but it's always like, there's the devil's in the details, so to speak. The Ifrit encounter that I was mentioning I felt to me like that was the way out for PCs. Like if they hadn't found a way to get to the ship at this point in time. And it also, like, now that you mentioned, like, you don't know how you ended up in this area sometimes. And like this Ifrit accidentally showed up here and is being chased by demons. And if you run into him and help him, then he'll all of a sudden just be like, get me out of here. I'll grant you wishes if you wish me back to the plane of fire. But, and he'll cut a deal with you. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I think it was an interesting encounter. I also like that the Ifrit is kind of like irritated at you because he can fly faster than the demons that are chasing him.
Yeah.
So if you actually get involved, you end up having to fight a bunch of demons, and he's just like, what? I don't want to owe you anything. Yeah. I was fine. And it's a substantial fight. It's a bunch of Varghouls, I think. They're not the world's easiest monster to fight. But anyways, basically this part involves the players exploring the general area around the portal that they came in from, getting some information, following the ship's back trail, and then eventually they should come upon the ship actually floating above the ruins of one of these abyssal cities. So even if you hadn't had the PCs in a city before then, you could have them, quote unquote, rescuing the fair maiden in the ruins of this city, because the destruction and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So
the ship's awesome.
the ships are awesome, and I guess like so 7 of these ships were created, and they're ships of chaos, and the ships are sentient, and one of their abilities is they have I guess they call it an entropy field, which makes everything in a I don't know what 300 something radius around it. Have to make like insanity saves almost, and so the ship is flying around and causing just absolute destruction in its wake, making whole cities turn on themselves and people kill each other. And
I have to write down the description, right? So the ship, let's see, it's at least 300 feet long, probably longer. It's about 100 feet wide, and it has heads, right? At least 100 feet tall, right? So there's one in the forward, there's one in the rear, so they're facing opposite direction. Each head is a colossal face as wide and as tall as the ship. They have glassy eyes, protruding noses, and gaping mouths full of teeth the size of tavern doors. Right. The one in the forward has curving ram's horns that go backwards and bind together, and the one in the back is a skeletal nastiness with eye holes sealed with milky God knows what. Right. So there's basically like, or is it 3 heads actually? Yeah, I don't know. It's just these giant, horrifying heads all melded together in this flying ship-like thing. And it's made up of a twisting mass of rope-like fibers that are woven together around an organic mass of pale white mottled with pale yellow. It looks like a vast piece of terracotta soiled from long exposure to smoke and filth. It's super gross. And the coolest thing about it is it runs on the souls of the damned, which are little abyssal larvae. So in its wake, it leaves little shriveled up husks of abyssal larvae, and that's one of the ways that the players can find the ship. They can just like follow this trail of shriveled worms.
Yeah, and if you damage the hull, like larvae will sprout out and attack you. Like super creative. Like I don't know, reading about the boat and like and it was just awesome. Like they did a really good job. It's just such a cool thing. And if you ever just wanted to steal a thing for something in the abyss or in the outer planes, like this boat was one of them.
Oh, if you for a demonic airship, it is just what you'd expect. Like you're not disappointed by it. And I do like that the setup too is the PCs don't know what it looks like. Like the Willem or whatever just tells them, "Oh, you'll know it when you see it."
Yeah.
Right, and then they actually see it and like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's the boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, like the ship is sentient. Like it has an awareness to it. It's controlled by a couple minds.
One mind. It's the soul of a Vrock.
Yeah.
And that's actually sort of the key point that you don't find out because it makes a major plot point on the boat. Is that's how the boat went missing. Is it's actually sentient, but nobody knows that they're sentient except for the demons that made it, right? So this causes problems. How the PCs get on the ship is sort of up to their own devices.
Yeah.
There's a teleportation trap. Did you want to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, so if your PCs choose to teleport onto the ship, they end up... the trap is caused by the entropy field, I guess, on the ship. But anyway, you get teleported into the brig immediately, and the brig encounter was probably one of my favorite encounters. It's got a couple of, I can't remember, humans maybe?
They're humans. Yeah. It's the Doom Guards that were on the ship to begin with, right?
So it's Hugh and his assistant who are there have gone insane, and they both think that they're healers. So they're trying to heal people that are in here that have been killed by the assistant, air quotes. So she's insane and she's trying to get out of here. And Hugh is insane, thinking that he's healing these dead people. And you're in this cage and you can talk to them and they think they're there to help you and all sorts of stuff. But there's enough space between the bars that you can wriggle through them. So if you choose to like be like, hey, help me out through here, he will be like, absolutely, let's get you out of there. And the moment he goes to help you, the assistant girl will come and stab him in the back and kill him and then let you go. And it's just like this weird, colorful mess of like insanity.
Of chaos. Which is what it's
exactly.
Supposed to be, right?
And it's you know, he was the ex-captain of the ship and stuff like that. So if you manage to restore their sanity, they can actually try and help you take back the ship. But it was just like a good entrance onto the boat, you know? It's just like, what the hell's going on?
The boat itself has got a bunch of encounters just with demons. Like there's nothing super crazy about it, right? Like just standard demon encounters, nothing in particular that I felt that was going to be super dangerous. The hardest part is probably getting onto the boat, just because they can see PCs coming from a long way away, and there's defenses like giant ballistas and ranged weapons and whatnot. So the PCs just try to like fly on it directly.
Yeah,
it's gonna be difficult.
And the boat's sentience will inform the crew that people that aren't Tenari are there. So
so stealth once they're on the boat isn't very possible, but like getting onto it shouldn't be that difficult, right? The teleportation is probably the easiest, which means the teleportation trap encounter is the most likely to occur. But even something as simple as like an invisibility field and flying is going to get them on there pretty easily. Once they're on, though, like you said, with the Ascension ship, stealth doesn't really play a role just because they can't hide. So I love the thing. It's like you clear the monsters, whatever, they fight their way to the bridge, and there's basically an illusion set up. So
the captain's chair.
The captain's chair illusion. So you kill the person in quote-unquote control of the ship, and then you can sit in the captain's chair, and then a voice in your head says, where should we go next?
Yeah.
And then you're like, to Sigil. And the ship goes, you bet.
Yeah.
And then starts to fly off. Not going to Sigil whatsoever. It is making a beeline for a portal deeper into the abyss to get to like where it's the shipyards basically are.
12 trees.
12 trees, yeah. So the PCs obviously don't know this unless they're paying attention. So the ship starts climbing altitude and heading towards this portal. So if the PCs don't realize what's happening, they're headed for basically the center of the abyss, and that's going to be the end of the adventure. It was fun.
Yeah. I thought about ways to like get around this, and it's like you could be mean, and like if they do get through it, and they're in all of a sudden, like you could, I thought it would be like a cool thing, like narrating, because all of a sudden you're in like the harbor of the ships of chaos, and you like see everything around you, and it's like your players should know at some point that they probably should turn around and get out of here. But there is like a safe haven in the area as well, that if they manage to get there, they might be...
It's not a for sure game over, but it's a pretty high chance of a game over. And basically, the PCs need to escape or destroy the ship. And the only way to destroy the ship is to destroy both of its brains. So there's one on either side. It's both the same personality. They both contain the Vrock or whatever. But I really like the point that there's two brains. So what I was thinking is the PC should destroy one of the brains, and then the ship should pretend like it's disabled.
Yeah.
And just be like, and
Start
just like
listing,
or like crash land or something like that, like to play possum to make them think that they killed it. Like I could see lots of ways that the ship could mess with them because it's sentient. So like you could definitely have some interactions with that. If for whatever the reason the PCs do realize they need to destroy the two brains, and they do so, the ship begins to disintegrate while they're on it.
Yep.
Which is bad.
Yep.
Especially if they don't have a means of flying very quickly, because it's going to be a long
fall
drop to the bottom. So the adventure might end with a splat, which also personally I'd find satisfying.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think like no matter how it ends up ending in this one, it's like the adventure in itself was so like in the essence of what this area should be, that I think your players would be like, all right, well, I guess we earned that.
Well, also one thing I did like is that even though it's pretty heavily biased towards destruction of the ship, which is totally fine. Like it's one of the goals. Like if you destroy the ship, Willem's just as happy as if you didn't destroy the ship, right? If you retrieve the ship. But because the ship is controlled by a mind, you can charm the ship, right? Like you can use magic, dominate mind, charm, and etc. to control the ship and actually bring it back to Sigil.
Temporarily, though, because as soon as it contorts through a gate, you release domination over it.
Yeah, but you just cast it again, right?
Yeah.
Like it's theoretically possible to gain this ship and return with it successfully.
Mm-hmm.
Is it likely?
Nah.
Not so much, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And I always sort of appreciate that aspect of it, is that it is possible, if not probable, right? So you're not completely forced to do things one way, right? Like you can absolutely succeed in the mission, right? So if they manage to actually bring the ship back, well, that provides some really interesting potential interactions, right? Because they could give it to Willem, they could return it to the Doom Guards, which would make them very popular with the Doom Guards. They could give it to any of the other factions, they could destroy it, right? So what's kind of interesting is there's several factions that'll be super excited if the ship goes back into service. There's several factions that'll be super excited if the ship gets destroyed.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win
for everybody almost.
Either way, like from the player standpoint, regardless of what you do, there's going to be groups that are angry at them, and there's going to be groups that are super
Pleased,
excited and happy. So they're going to make enemies and they're going to make friends regardless of the outcome. If they end up destroying the ship, the only real change to it is Willem basically forces them to take an interview under
charm effect
basically, so they can't lie. And as long as that, I mean, that'll go just fine. They're like, okay, good, great. You know, that was the information we wanted.
Yeah, he just wants to make sure that you're telling the truth and that it was destroyed, which is, I don't see why anyone would be like, no. And then you get a bunch of gold.
You get a bunch of more stuff, and then following sort of the handing in stuff, this is where all the other side questy aspects of it could be playing a role, right? This is where you bring back the Succubus if she came back with them. This is where future issues with the Glabrezu can play a role. This is where whether or not they've developed any devilish, fiendish, I guess, taint from using their power keys plays a role, right? Like there's lots of interesting fallout from this encounter that all can come into play in sort of the days following this particular encounter, right? Like the fact that their weapons are going to disappear or items are going to disappear. And you could definitely play that up a lot, right? Because you could just have them disappear at a very thematically appropriate time. Right? Like if it's a magic carpet, well, you know what? Maybe it starts to unravel at an inopportune moment. Right? Like instead of, you could, depending on the item and what you want to do with it, you could definitely have it play a role in future campaign moments. I mean, you could also just have it like, and you wake up one day and it's gone, right? Like, which is less fun.
Less fun for sure.
But I think however you do it, it should be clear that it didn't get stolen, like that it disintegrates or disappears or something like that, so that the players understand that this is due to their deal with the devil, if you will. Right? Like that aspect of it should definitely play a role. But regardless of how the outcome is, the PCs are now known in Sigil. This is a big deal, right? And that should open up a lot of doors.
Absolutely. So, good and bad.
Good and bad, right? So this should definitely open up potential patrons, maybe potential offers of joining various
any of the factions really.
Sorry, that's the word I was looking for.
Doom Guards, you know.
Well, the Doom Guards are going to hate them if they destroy the
Governor's
ship.
Mercy Killers or Harmoniums, or they all wanted the ship destroyed, and so I mean, you're going to get invites to parties basically. Yeah,
for sure. So it's super fun, right? Like it's a great Planescape adventure. I don't know how much it would translate to not being run on the plains. Like, I think this is very much an adventure of its place, if you will. So I don't think I'd move it to a city outside of the plains. Like, this isn't something you just encounter in Waterdeep so much, just due to the nature of how a lot of this works. And the payoff wouldn't be nearly as great, because a lot of the fun in the future comes out of the interactions and consequences with the factions.
Absolutely,
Right?
yeah.
So that's part of the fun. And also, I think, depending on your party, if you have people that are suddenly totally okay with their alliance with the powers of the Nine Hells, it can change the arc of your campaign.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot. Though I'd also say, like, if you just want to play a mid to high level powered game, start at level 10, start with this adventure.
Yeah.
And
yeah. It'll be fun regardless of what
it'll be
happens.
fun. And it's one of those situations where you can just totally have them all having randomly been teleported.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good adventure because it could be run as a one-shot. You could throw it into your existing campaign, or you could start a campaign from here.
Yeah.
It hits like the sweet spot of being mid-level.
Yeah,
really.
and you don't need to have any experience with the city or the plains to get everything out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a pretty great thing to have such a good example of the particular setting that serves as a great introduction to it. An introduction in the sense of like incorporating your characters into the setting at such a high level, which isn't something that's necessarily easy to do.
Yeah.
And I felt it did a really good job.
I agree. I think that's all we've got to say about this adventure.
Yeah, I don't want to start repeating myself.
As always, guys, thank you for listening. The Imp and Ogre at gmail.com or on Twitter's at the Imp and Ogre is how you can get to us. We'll get back to you when we can. Next week, we are going to be talking about Lord of the Iron Fortress, which is a 3E adventure for 15th level PCs. Talk to you then.
Right.